listeners. Welcome to Lecture 25, where we explore the legal dimensions of reproductive health. In our last two lectures, we discussed gender inequality and how reproductive rights are framed as human rights. Today, we turn our focus to legal frameworks that govern reproductive health, laws which provide both opportunities and barriers. They can protect rights, but they can also restrict access. By understanding key national and international legal frameworks, we can see how legal systems shape reproductive health outcomes and where reforms are necessary to ensure justice, equity, and dignity. Law is a powerful determinant of reproductive health. Legal frameworks define what services are available, who can access them, and under what conditions can they be accessed. They regulate the exercise of reproductive rights while also protecting individuals from exploitation or harm. However, the same laws can also impose restrictions, such as requirement of spousal consent for abortion or criminalizing adolescent sexuality that deny autonomy. Thus, the legal environment is critical in shaping whether sexual and reproductive health rights are realized in practice. Legal frameworks are important. Why they're important? Because they safeguard reproductive rights, giving individuals legal grounds to claim services or protection. They also provide clarity for healthcare providers, setting standards of practice and defining their responsibilities. Finally, laws enable accountability by creating mechanisms to address violations and enforce justice. Without clear legal frameworks, reproductive health is actually left vulnerable to inconsistency, discrimination, and abuse. Ensuring strong and progressive legal provisions is therefore a cornerstone of equitable reproductive health systems. International legal instruments provide the foundation for reproductive rights globally. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 affirmed the right to health and dignity. The Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 1979 specially called on states to eliminate gender discrimination in health and reproduction. The International Conference on Population and Development in 1994 was historic in declaring reproductive rights as human rights. These instruments guide national governments in aligning their laws with human rights commitments. In India, the Constitution provides a strong legal basis for reproductive rights. Article 21 guarantees the right to life and personal liberty, which the Supreme Court has interpreted to include the right of health and reproductive autonomy. The right to equality and non discrimination ensures women cannot be denied access to health services based on gender. Directive principles of state policy direct the state to improve health and welfare, improving the maternal and child health as an inclusion. Thus, reproductive rights are embedded within India's constitutional framework, even if the challenges are there in implementation of these frameworks. Family planning in India is guided by legal principles of voluntarism and informed choice. Coercive sterilization is prohibited, following past controversies where targets were forced procedures violated rights. Informed consent is the cornerstone, requiring that clients be given accurate information about methods and possible side effects before choosing. They have a right to choose about whatever kind of contraception they want to use, and they are provided with the basket of choices with all the information about them. The legal framework supports autonomy. Gaps persist in practice, with cases of poor counseling and subtle coercion. Strengthening enforcement of voluntarism and informed consent remains a legal and ethical priority. The Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1971 was a landmark law that legalized abortion under specific conditions. The 2021 amendment expanded access by increasing gestational limits to 20 weeks for all women and up to 24 weeks for certain categories such as survivors of rape or minors. It also recognized failure of contraception as a ground for abortion for both married and unmarried women, advancing reproductive rights. However, the Act still requires approval from medical practitioners, limiting absolute autonomy. Balancing safety and autonomy remains central to abortion law. The Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act of 1994, which was amended in 2003, is a critical law addressing gender inequality. It prohibits sex selection before or after conception, aiming to combat female feticide and skewed sex ratios. The Act regulates the use of ultrasound and other diagnostic procedures to prevent misuse of sex determination. While important, implemented while important, implementation challenges remain, with misuse and corruption persisting. The law highlights how legal frameworks can protect rights but must be enforced consistently to be effective. Child marriage remains a major barrier to reproductive health. The Prohibition of Child Marriage Act of 2006 sets the legal age of marriage at 18 for women and 21 for men. It makes child marriages avoidable at the option of the minor and provides legal remedies to annul such marriages. Punishments are prescribed for those who promote or enable child marriages. Despite this, enforcement is weak and early marriages persist, especially in rural areas and in marginalized, vulnerable communities. Strengthening enforcement and addressing the cultural acceptance are the key challenges in early marriages and child marriages. The Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act of 2012 provides a strong legal framework to protect minors from sexual abuse. It defines all sexual activity with individuals under 18 as statutory rape, regardless of consent. While this protects minors from exploitation, it also creates tensions and with adolescent reproductive rights, as consensual relationships among adolescents are criminalized. This overlap illustrates the challenges of balancing protection with autonomy in reproductive health laws. Discussions around reform and nuanced interpretations continue. The Surrogacy Regulation Act of 2021 regulates surrogacy in India. It allows altruistic surrogacy where no monetary compensation beyond medical expenses is given, but prohibits commercial surrogacy to prevent exploitation. The law requires intending couples to meet eligibility criteria and restricts surrogate mothers to married women with children. While intended to protect women from exploitation, critics argue it restricts reproductive autonomy and excludes single parents and LGBTQ plus individuals. Balancing protection with inclusivity remains a balancing protection with inclusivity remains a debated issue in surrogacy law. The Assisted Reproductive Technology Regulation Act of 2021 complements the Surrogacy Act by regulating IVF and related technologies. It establishes standards for clinics and gamete banks, ensuring safety and quality. It also sets out rights and responsibilities of donors, patients, and clinics. While the law strengthens regulation, some argue it is overly restrictive, limiting access for single individuals and LGBTQs. Balancing safety, ethics, and inclusivity remains central to ART regulation. Gender based violence laws intersect with reproductive health by protecting women's safety and autonomy. The Domestic Violence Act provides protection against physical, emotional, and sexual abuse within households. The 2013 criminal law amendments broadened the definitions of sexual assault and strengthened penalties. The Sexual Harassment Act provides the protection for women in workplaces. These laws aim to create safer environments, enabling women to exercise their reproductive rights without coercion or violence. Effective implementation remains critical for those protections to translate into improved health outcomes. The HIV/AIDS Prevention and Control Act of 2017 was a major step forwards in right based health law. It prohibits discrimination against people living with HIV in healthcare, employment, and education. It ensures confidentiality of HIV status and provides legal protection against disclosure without consent. The Act also guarantees access to treatment, recognizing HIV care as a legal entitlement. This law demonstrates how rights based legal frameworks can empower marginalized groups and strengthen health outcomes. Globally, abortion laws vary widely, from liberal regimes where abortion is available on request to highly restrictive laws where it is banned entirely. Some countries criminalize abortion except to save a woman's life, while others allow it for socio-economic reasons. These variations reflect differing cultural, religious, and political contexts. The global debate continues that restrictive laws do not reduce abortions, they only make them unsafe. This highlights the importance of right based approaches in abortion law. Contraception laws emphasize voluntarism and informed consent, but challenges remain. In many countries, including India, unmarried adolescents often face barriers in accessing contraceptives due to provider bias or legal restrictions. This denies them their rights and increases risks of unintended pregnancies. Ensuring freedom of choices for all individuals, regardless of age or marital status, is central to realizing reproductive rights. Legal frameworks must therefore protect access rather than restrict it. Reproductive health law often involves ethical legal dilemmas. One example is adolescent consent, where the law aims to protect young but may also restrict their autonomy. Another is balancing autonomy with cultural or religious values, such as in abortion or in surrogacy. These conflicts highlight the challenge of creating laws that respect rights while being sensitive to context. Ethical legal dilemmas require dialogue, flexibility, and constant evaluation to ensure laws serve the best interest of individuals and society. The judiciary has played a critical role in advancing reproductive rights in India. Landmark Supreme Court judgments have expanded the interpretation of Article 21 to include reproductive autonomy and privacy. Courts have ruled on issues such as abortion access, consent, and surrogacy, often siding with protection of rights and dignity. Judicial activism has filled gaps in legislation, ensuring that constitutional principles of autonomy and equality are upheld in reproductive health. This demonstrates the judiciary's vital role in shaping the legal landscape. Take an example of the case of Suchita Srivastav of 2009. The Supreme Court affirmed that a woman's right to make reproductive choices is a dimension of personal liberty under the Act of Article 21. The court emphasized that consent is central to abortion and that forced medical procedures violate the autonomy of women. This landmark judgment strengthened women's rights in abortion cases, setting a precedent that reproductive autonomy is constitutionally protected. It illustrates how legal interpretation can advance reproductive rights even when laws are restrictive. Another important judgment was Puttaswamy judgment in 2017. It was another milestone. The Supreme Court declared the right to privacy a fundamental right under the Constitution. This right includes bodily autonomy, reproductive choices, and personal decisions about family and sexuality. By embedding privacy within constitutional protections, the judgment provided a strong legal basis of sexual and reproductive health rights. It ensures that state and societal interference in personal decisions is limited, strengthening the autonomy and dignity of women. While progressive laws exist, challenges in implementation undermine their impact. Weak enforcement means violations which often go unpunished. Lack of legal literacy among citizens prevents them from claiming their rights. Provider bias, where healthcare workers impose their own values on clients, further restricts access. These challenges highlights that laws alone are not enough. Effective implementation, education, and accountability are equally critical for realizing the reproductive rights. At times, laws themselves create barriers. Criminalization of adolescent sexuality under the POCSO restrict access to services for young people in consensual relationships. Abortion laws, while progressive, still require provider approval. Unmarried individuals Abortion laws, while progressive, still require provider approval, limiting absolute autonomy. Surrogacy and ART laws exclude unmarried individuals and LGBTQ people, reinforcing discrimination. These barriers show that legal frameworks must be continually reviewed and reformed to ensure they protect rather than restrict the reproductive rights. The future of reproductive health law lies in reform. Laws must be inclusive, recognizing the rights of all individuals regardless of marital status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. They must expand autonomy, allowing individuals to make decisions about their bodies with minimal restrictions. Most importantly, national frameworks must align with international human rights commitments, ensuring consistency with principles of equality, dignity, and justice. Continuous reform and review is necessary to keep pace with the changing realities of the societies and the communities. Civil societies play a vital role in shaping reproductive health law. Advocacy groups lobby for progressive legislation and challenge restrictive laws. Legal aid organizations help individuals understand and claim their rights. Civil society also monitors violations, holding governments and providers accountable. By amplifying marginalized community voices, civil society ensures that legal reforms and enforcements remain grounded in lived realities. Their role is essential in bridging the gap between law and practice. Learning from international best practices can inform reforms in India. Some countries provide abortion on request within broad gestational limits, ensuring autonomy and safety. Others have successfully implemented comprehensive sexuality education as a legal requirement. Inclusive ART and surrogacy laws in progressive nations allow single people and LGBTQ plus people equal access to reproductive technologies. These examples shows that rights-based legal frameworks are achievable and effective. Adapting such practices to India's context can strengthen reproductive rights. Now, ethical principles underpin reproductive health law. Respect for autonomy ensures individuals can make free decisions about their bodies. Justice and equity demand that laws protect vulnerable groups and promote fairness. Non maleficence, that is, do not harm, and beneficence, that is, act in best interest, guide healthcare providers in delivering safe and supportive services. Embedding these ethical principles into law ensures that legal frameworks not only regulate but also protect and empower individuals for their rights. The future of reproductive health law lies in gender sensitivity, accountability, and integration. Laws must be gender sensitive, recognizing and addressing inequalities that limit women's health. Stronger accountability mechanisms such as independent monitoring bodies and grievance redressal systems are necessary to enforce rights. Integration of reproductive rights into universal health coverage frameworks will ensure that legal guarantees translate into actual access. The future actions are essential for sustainable and equitable progress of a country. To summarize, law is a critical determinant of reproductive health. India has enacted progressive frameworks such as the MTP Act, PCPNDT Act, and ART laws, but gaps in inclusivity and implementation persist. Legal barriers often restrict adolescents, unmarried individuals, and LGBTQ communities. Effective realization of reproductive rights requires not only strong laws but also enforcement, awareness, and inclusivity. The key takeaway is that law must serve as an enabler and not as a barrier to reproductive health. In conclusion, legal frameworks play a dual role. They protect rights, regulate practices, and provide accountability. But they can also impose restrictions. To ensure justice and equity, reproductive health law must evolve continuously, aligning with human rights principles and responding to changing social realities. Progressive reforms, stronger enforcements, and inclusivity will be central. Ultimately, the law must serve people, safeguarding their rights in health. Thank you. This was all for this session. Next, in lecture 26, we take up violence against women. Thank you.